There's a moment in sports that you can't fake. You can't manufacture it, you can't plan for it, and you definitely can't buy it. It just happens. And when it does, you feel it in your chest before you even fully understand what you're watching. That moment happened in Austria. And the person at the center of it was a young woman named Alex, a Filipino tennis player who walked into a foreign stadium and somehow, by the end of it all, made that entire arena feel like it was built for her. Now I know what you're thinking. Players travel abroad all the time. Competing on foreign soil is literally part of professional tennis. But this was different. This wasn't just a player performing well in another country. This was something deeper, something that went beyond the scoreboard, beyond rankings, beyond everything that usually defines a tennis tournament. And to really understand why this moment hit so hard, you have to picture the scene from the very beginning. Alex wasn't arriving as a headline act. She wasn't the name plastered on promotional posters or the player the broadcasters were building their narratives around. She came into that tournament as someone the casual fan might overlook entirely. Young, ambitious, talented, but on paper, just another competitor in a stacked draw full of experienced players who had been on this circuit far longer than she had. Austria wasn't her home. The crowd wasn't her crowd. The language, the atmosphere, the culture, none of it was familiar to her. And yet she walked onto that court with a kind of quiet certainty that's genuinely rare in someone her age. Not arrogance, not bravado, just this calm, focused energy that said she knew exactly why she was there. The first match started the way you'd expect. Careful, intense, both players feeling each other out. But within the first few games, you could already see something building. Alex wasn't just playing tennis. She was competing on a completely different emotional frequency. Every ball she chased down, every point she fought for, every moment where she could have taken a step back and played it safe but instead chose to step in and attack, all of it carried a kind of conviction that people in that stadium hadn't necessarily come there expecting to see. And crowds, real crowds, they notice. They always do. It started small. A ripple of applause after a particularly fearless rally. A few louder cheers when she pulled off a shot that had no business going in. Nothing dramatic, just the early signs of a crowd warming up to something they hadn't anticipated. But here's the thing about momentum, in sports and in life. Once it starts moving in your direction, it compounds. Every single point Alex won added another layer to the connection forming between her and those thousands of strangers in the stands. By the middle of her first match, people who had walked in with zero investment in her result were suddenly leaning forward in their seats. And that shift, that moment when a neutral crowd stops being neutral, that's one of the rarest and most electric things you can witness in live sport. It kept building from there. Match after match, round after round, Alex kept advancing. And with every win, the atmosphere around her transformed a little more. The applause got fuller. The reactions got sharper. And then something happened that genuinely stopped people in their tracks. Someone in the crowd pulled out a Filipino flag. Just one at first, a single flag waving among thousands of Austrian spectators. Then another appeared somewhere else in the stands. Then another. And before long, scattered throughout this European arena, you could see the colors of the Philippines cutting through the crowd like something out of a movie. Some of those flag bearers were Filipino fans who had traveled or lived nearby. But some of them weren't Filipino at all. Some of them were Austrian spectators who had simply fallen in love with what they were watching and wanted to be part of it. That detail right there tells you everything about what Alex was doing. She wasn't just winning tennis matches. She was pulling people into her story. And once you're in someone's story, once you're emotionally invested in their journey, you stop being a spectator. You become a supporter. The chants started growing louder. Her name bouncing off the walls of that stadium in a way that sent chills through everyone watching, whether they were in the arena or on a screen thousands of miles away. People were on their feet for points that weren't even match points. They were celebrating rallies like they were championship moments because for them, in that setting, they genuinely were. And think about what that must have felt like from Alex's perspective. You're far from home. You're in a country where you didn't expect to have any kind of built-in support. And instead of playing in quiet, polite, neutral silence, you're suddenly surrounded by this wall of noise and energy that exists entirely because of what you've been doing on the court. That energy doesn't just lift you emotionally. It changes how you play. It sharpens you. It replaces that small voice of doubt that every competitor carries with something much louder and much more powerful, belief. And you could see it translating directly into her performance. Her movement became more fluid. Her shot selection grew bolder. The moments where she might have hesitated, where a younger player might have tightened up under that weight of expectation, Alex leaned into them. She fed off the crowd and the crowd fed off her, and the whole thing became this extraordinary back and forth cycle of energy that just kept escalating with every game. Her tennis in those matches was genuinely something to watch. She was reading opponents brilliantly, getting into position early, turning defensive situations into attacking opportunities with a composure that felt well beyond her years. Her serve was landing clean and precise. Her returns were aggressive. And when rallies got long and physical and demanded everything she had physically and mentally, she didn't fade. She found another gear. There were points in those matches that you'd watch and genuinely think, how did she get to that ball? How did she set up that shot from that position? It was the kind of tennis that makes people stop scrolling, stop whatever they are doing and just watch. Because talent at that level, expressed with that kind of heart, it cuts through everything. Now it would be easy to frame this whole story purely around the crowd reaction, the flags, the chants, the electric atmosphere. And yes, all of that was real and all of it mattered deeply. But what made this moment genuinely historic rather than just memorable was the combination. It was the performance and the connection happening at the same time, reinforcing each other, elevating each other. Because a crowd can love a player who loses gracefully. Fans can get behind someone who fights hard and comes up short. That happens all the time in sports. But when a player earns that kind of emotional investment from a crowd and then goes out and delivers the performances to match it, when the story and the substance align, that's when something truly rare happens. That's when you stop being just a promising young athlete and you start becoming something more. Something that lives in people's memories long after the tournament is over. Alex was doing both. She was giving the crowd every reason to believe in her emotionally and then going out on that court and proving that their belief was well placed. And the world was watching. Social media was erupting with clips of her rallies, videos of the crowd reaction, the flags in the Austrian stands. People who had never watched a tennis match in their lives were sharing these moments because the story transcended the sport. It wasn't just a tennis story. It was a human story. A story about someone far from home, someone who wasn't supposed to be the main character of this tournament, stepping into the spotlight and refusing to leave. Back in the Philippines, an entire nation was awake and watching. There's something profoundly moving about that image. Millions of people gathered around screens, united by pride and hope and the electric feeling of watching one of their own do something extraordinary on a world stage. For young girls in Manila, in Cebu, in Davao, watching Alex compete and thrive in that Austrian arena, the message was loud and clear. The world stage isn't someone else's territory. It belongs to you too if you're willing to work for it and brave enough to claim it. That kind of representation matters more than most people realize. It doesn't just inspire. It reshapes what people believe is possible for themselves. And then there's the broader conversation that Alex's run in Austria opened up about the sport itself. Tennis has long carried a reputation as a game where certain nations, certain traditions, and certain pedigrees dominate. There's a hierarchy that's been baked in for decades. And while that hierarchy hasn't disappeared, what happened in Austria was a reminder that it's being challenged. That the next generation of players is coming from everywhere. That talent doesn't recognize borders or check passports. That a young woman from Southeast Asia can walk into a European stadium and not only compete at the highest level but completely command the room. That means something. Not just for Filipino tennis, not just for Asian tennis, but for the sport globally. It signals that the map of where the game's best players come from is expanding, and that's genuinely exciting for everyone who loves watching tennis at its highest level. By the time the tournament reached its final stages, Alex had become the story. Not just in Austria, not just in the Philippines, but across the tennis world. Journalists were writing about her. Analysts were breaking down her game. Former players were speaking about her potential. And through all of it, she remained composed and focused on what was actually in front of her, the next match, the next point, the next opportunity to show the world what she was made of. That kind of mental maturity, the ability to stay grounded when everything around you is amplifying, when the noise gets louder and the pressure gets heavier, that's not something you can teach. You either have it or you don't. And Alex clearly has it. When it was all over, when the last point was played and the dust settled, what remained wasn't just a result in a tennis tournament. What remained was a feeling. The feeling that you had witnessed something genuinely special. The feeling that you had watched a young athlete step onto a stage that was never designed for her and make it entirely her own. The crowd that had arrived as strangers left as fans. The stadium that had started as neutral ground ended as something personal and emotional and unforgettable. And Alex, who had flown into Austria as an underdog with something to prove, left as a name the tennis world won't be forgetting anytime soon. Because that's the thing about moments like this. They don't fade. The clips get rewatched. The stories get retold. The young players who saw it carry that image with them into their own training sessions, their own matches, their own moments of doubt when they need to remember that anything is genuinely possible. Austria gave us one of those rare moments. And Alex gave Austria a performance it will talk about for years. Not because of the trophy, not because of the ranking points, but because of what it felt like to be there, to be part of that energy, to be inside that story as it unfolded in real time. That's what sport at its best actually does. It reminds you why you fell in love with it in the first place.